Hello, I'm Judge Houston Wells. Welcome to County Connections. Today is the eve of Veterans Day, and I have the great honor to have two veterans from World War II with me today. Mr. Bob Barker from the United States Navy, Mr. Kenneth Tracy from the United States Army. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here, and thank you for this opportunity to share your experiences with our audience about Veterans Day and what it's like to be a veteran and to serve in our armed forces. Mr. Barker, I'll start with you. If you would be so kind, tell us something about your experience in serving in the Navy during World War II.
Well, the first thing I remember was boot camp. And I went up to eat one day, and not used to their food, but it wasn't too good. And so I went dumping it in the trash, and the fellow walked up there and said, "Can you read?" I said, "I think I can." He said, "That's the sign means what it said. Take what you want, but eat all you take." So go to the table and eat it. So I go back to the table and put all of it underneath the table and go out.
Yeah. What actually was your job in the service?
I was a seaman. And first thing I got was at Norfolk, Virginia. That's where I got aboard ship. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, they had us a big back secret, Got up the next morning, I couldn't even see land. I don't know where the hell we got aboard that ship at. But it was next morning, and we went to Cuba. And in Cuba, I went to church there. We went through a cyclone fence. And we went in to walk to that church there. And the next thing I remember, we was going through the Panama Canal. And
then you were in the Pacific, and you were heading to Okinawa, or is that?
I was heading to Hawaii.
Oh, Hawaii.
Pearl
Okay.
Harbor,
Okay.
Yeah. It took us 28 days to go from Panama Canal to Hawaii, Pearl Harbor.
Wow.
And we picked up a bunch of prisoners there and taken them to Anahuac. And then from there we went to Guam and Japan. I mean, not Saipan, and then to Okinawa.
Were you actually in any of the naval battles, and there were quite a few in the Pacific during your tenure?
We never had any. The ship I was on, so they'd be wasting the shots. They'd be shooting it in. And we got to Okinawa. We taken a bunch of Marines in there to a little bit in hole in the Okinawa where we went in, taking them Marines in there. And the worst part about that, they come over every night dropping bombs. But our ship was so little that we just lay smoke screens around it at night. They couldn't see us with a bomb anyway. We laid there and then went to to Philippines and stayed down there. We was getting ready to invasion of Japan when they ended the sea battles. And then we left there and went to Japan. We was there for about a month. Went to Yokohama in Japan and Sendai. That's the only, we used to Sendai, a ship load of us was loaded of coal. And they carried that off in baskets, day and night, 24 hours a day. I thought, well, they'll take a month. In about 3 days, they had the ship unloaded, carried it off in baskets. I thought that was unusual for me.
You've got a great story about you were in Okinawa when the United States took Okinawa from Japan, and that was around 1945, I guess it was. Yeah. And then something happened years later with your son. Tell the audience about that story.
Well, I was the invasion of Okinawa when we took it away from the Japanese. And years later, I was back in Kentucky, and my son was in the Air Force, and he went over there, and while he was in Okinawa, they give it back to Japan.
How about that?
I mean, but we take it away from him, and he was there when they give it back to him. I guess, which is about all I could tell. Is that 5 minutes?
Isn't that something? What a great story, and it's so wonderful that you have served our country so well in such a honorable way. Anything else you'd like to say about any of your experiences during that tenure?
That's about it, I guess. Well, laying that smoke screen at night, I was on LCVP at night, had a motor burned diesel fuel and just put out smoke. And we were going by one ship one night, and bomb hit it and blowed it up and sunk the CVS I was on. And we was in the water from about, I don't know, 1:30 till daylight next morning out of it.
Wow.
But, we had our life jackets on, so I wasn't worried too much about it.
Yeah. So in 1944, you enlisted in the Navy.
I was 17 years old.
17 years old.
And I got out and went to get married, and I was 20. Back then, I had to have father sign my paper to get married when I got married at 20. And now I've been married 72 years.
To the same lady.
Same lady.
Yes, sir. And so
I don't know the head anymore.
in 1944, when so many brave Americans enlisted in the service to go fight the Japanese and the Germans,
Yeah.
you were living in Frankfurt.
Yeah, I was living in Franklin County. I lived out by Schweitzer. And we went to the Navy, but me and the guy from Peaks Mill, Robert what's his name? Anyway, the guy from Peaks Mill, and I was to Louisville and Louisville, Chicago on the same train. And we didn't know enough after we got to Chicago. I knew it. When I saw him, I said, well, that boy's from Peaks Mill. I asked him, he said, yeah. Bondrich was his name, Robert Bondrich.
Yeah, the Bondrich are all from out in the Peaks Mill area.
Yeah, that's where he lived in. I've never seen him since I got out.
How about that? And was he in the Navy as well?
He was in the Navy going the same place I was going.
How about that?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I guess that's about enough.
Well,
Let that old man talk.
we'll let Mr. Tracy talk. Mr. Tracy, tell us about your experience. You were on the other side of the world. You were on the European side, and you were fighting the Germans at that time.
Yeah.
And you came in 1942, enlisted in the Army, and you were sent to Scotland. After that, after you got into Scotland, where'd you go?
Went from Scotland to England. Stayed there for a while and then went into Le Havre, France. And stayed there a while. We were supposed to go in on D-Day in Normandy, but they didn't. They pulled us out for some reason. I don't know why. I was glad. And
Mr. Tracy, what was it like during that time in 44 of all that buildup that was going on in England for the invasion of Europe? And there were thousands and thousands and thousands of troops that were there in England, and we know that England's not very big. So what was it like being a soldier in another country, getting ready to go to war, thinking, well, I could be shot and killed?
well, I don't know. Just you really didn't think about that. You just thought about living that day. At night, the sirens would go off, and we'd have to go to a shelter. As long as we was in England, we done that. And we tried to live each day as it come along.
One day at a time.
Yeah. And we didn't know where we was going the next day or where we would be. We'd go in trucks, and you couldn't see any light at night. We drove mostly, and you didn't know where you was going or where you'd been.
And you were actually in the Battle of the Bulge, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well,
It was cold.
yeah, it was cold and snow. You'd wake up every morning with snow over you, if you was lucky. And
You were lucky if you woke up, I guess.
I guess I was lucky. And I don't know. It's just
After you left after the Battle of the Bulge, and I asked you earlier if you had run into Patton, and you said you didn't, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Well, everybody knows about Patton, and anybody who's in the United States Army that served was always had some great things to say about General Patton.
The thing that you say is hearsay mostly, because you hardly ever seen him. I've seen him once, and that was all. Didn't talk to him or say anything to him.
Once you left the battle, you were moved on from the Battle of the Bulge. You had to be then moved, I guess, close to Germany or into Germany.
Yeah, was in Germany, and was in Munich, and
As the war ended, were you in Munich at that time when the war ended?
yeah.
Yeah.
I was in we done got through Germany, and when the thing ended, we went on garden cigarette camps.
Garden cigarette camps.
They called them cigarette camps. They was named Lucky Strike, Gold, Chesterfield, that kind of name. It was prison camps. They kept all prisoners there.
The German prisoners.
Yeah. And I know they told us that one got out, shoot him. Well, I was on duty one night, and one got out, and he took off. And 2 or 3 others took off after him, and I didn't shoot. They finally caught him and got him back in camp. But I never know who he was, where he went to, or nothing.
Yes, sir. You enlisted in the Army in 1942. What was it? Because that's right at the beginning of the war. Mr. Barker enlisted in 44, so the war is pretty much moving on. But you came in right at the beginning of the war. What was our country like? And actually, you're from Frankfort. What was Frankfort like in 1942 as the war started out?
Oh, I didn't see much difference in it. You just
Well, there had been a lot of buzz in the community about going to fight because everybody wanted to enlist and get in the service and serve the country. A lot of pride in the country, and a lot of pride in our President Roosevelt at that time, and everybody was ready to go fight either the Germans or the Japanese at that time because of the declaration of war. But Frankfurt being the capital city, there had to have been a lot of buzz and a lot of excitement and apprehension as well about going to war.
Well, not for me. I wasn't ready, didn't want to go, or just had to.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah. Did you go down during that time at the beginning of the war? Where did you go to enlist? Down here in downtown Frankfurt?
No, I think in Louisville.
Oh, okay.
Went down there and joined.
And where did you go to Fort Knox after Louisville?
No, we went to Fort Bliss, Texas.
Okay.
And I think that was our first stop. We went on train there, and that's where we take our basic training.
All right. And then you said you had an experience of going across the Atlantic Ocean on the Queen Mary.
On the Queen Mary, taking us 7 days to go across. We went over unescorted, and 7 days. We landed in Scotland, went from Scotland to England, and from England to La Havre, France, and then up through the hedgerows. And that was about hedgerows, and then into the Battle of the Bulge. Went to Munich, Germany. Went through Frankfurt, Germany.
Did you ever make it to Berlin at the end of the war?
Yeah.
Germany itself had to have been just a horrible sight because of all the bombing and the destruction of war itself, wasn't it? And actually, Europe was probably the same way.
Yeah. Well, Europe wasn't tore up so bad, but Germany was. I seen Hitler's hideout. I was up there, and it was just tore all to pieces. All the buildings was. That's where he had his stormtroopers, and the building was all tore up. And
Did you run into any Russian soldiers, and was there ever any friendly communication with Russian soldiers at that time?
we had Russian soldiers. We seen them kind of like Patton. We seen them, and that was all. Mm-hmm. They didn't get into anything we was into. I don't know.
Well, I want to say thank you for your service. Thank you, Mr. Tracy, for your service. Mr. Barker, thank you for your service. And we're today talking about Veterans Day, and it is a solemn moment. Because 100 years ago, and by the way, Mr. Tracy, I believe you're going to be 100 years old, or are you already 100 years old?
The 8th day of December, I'll be 100.
Congratulations. But 100 years ago, when you were born, we were in a war that was supposed to end all wars.
Ended.
And 1918,
That's when I was born.
and World War I ended. And as we look back 100 years ago in this celebration of Veterans Day, we're talking about the end of a war that, as you all know, you were kids after that war, and you came on a little bit later, but history book says that World War I was a war to end all wars, yes, but it didn't, and you ended up serving, and so we want to say thank you for your service and appreciate it. And so I'm going to give you all another chance on the microphone to say something about being a veteran yourself.
I joined down at the old post office is where I joined at.
Okay.
Down there. Two of us went down there. I passed, he didn't pass. And he went in the Air Force later on, but he didn't pass to go in the Navy, which we thought was funny then.
Yeah.
He stood up when we got married, but he's dead now.
Yeah. Okay. You want to say anything about service today?
I don't know much about it. It's just happened.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to say, I seen my brother-in-law in Germany, met him.
Whereabouts in Germany did you see your brother-in-law?
On the, what's that big road? Autobahn?
The Autobahn in Germany somewhere? You met him, and as a supply truck was...
the captain was going somewhere, and I asked him if I could go, and he let me go with him. And they stopped, and he said, that way. And that's the way I found him. I stuck off that way and found him out in the field with some other troops. And we sat down there and had a...
I bet you hugged each other. We're so glad to see each other. Yeah.
We were really glad to see one another.
I bet.
And he apologized because he didn't have a drink of booze for me.
That's a great... Gentlemen, Mr. Barker, Mr. Tracy, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. And happy Veterans Day, and happy Veterans Day to all our veterans, and thank you, veterans, for what you do for our country and for serving our country. God bless you. This has been County Connections. Thank you for watching County Connections. We hope that you like and share this program. Thank you so much for watching.